Ethan had spent months planning the perfect engagement party, imagining the moment he would stand beside Alyssa and celebrate their future together. Everything was set, every detail carefully chosen, and with only 48 hours left, he believed nothing could go wrong. But that night, Alyssa walked in, scrolling through photos on her phone, barely looking at him before dropping a single sentence that shattered everything. She said the venue wasn't beautiful enough, the lighting wasn't flattering, and the entire event was unworthy of her Instagram feed. Ethan froze, thinking she was joking, but her expression stayed cold and calculated. She insisted the party had to be canceled immediately and demanded he lie to every guest about the reason. In that moment, Ethan realized he wasn't just facing a change of plans. He was standing at the edge of a disaster he never saw coming. Alyssa didn't just say the venue wasn't good enough. She dissected it like a cruel critic reviewing a place she never intended to like. She zoomed into photos Ethan had proudly sent her weeks earlier, pointing at walls, lights, decorations, and even the chairs. She said the lighting made her skin look dull, the walls looked cheap, and the floral arrangements weren't luxury-coded. Ethan tried to explain that the venue had sentimental meaning, that it was the first place they ever talked about marriage, but she brushed it off with a flick of her hand. To her, emotional value meant nothing if it couldn't translate into aesthetic value online. She scrolled through social media accounts of influencers she followed and compared their engagement events to his. She muttered things like, "We can't post this, people will judge, and it doesn't match my personal brand." Each sentence felt like another cut into the effort and heart Ethan had poured into planning this celebration. But her next comment struck him harder than all the others. She said some of the guests Ethan planned to invite didn't fit the vibe. When he asked what that meant, Alyssa answered without hesitation. She said a few people weren't camera-friendly, and she didn't want them in the background of her engagement photos. Those guests included Ethan's childhood friends, people who had been with him through good times and bad, people who loved him long before she ever entered his life. It was like she had reduced every human relationship to a prop that either enhanced or ruined her online image. Ethan told her he couldn't uninvite people based on their looks, but she stared at him as if he were being unreasonable. She said public image mattered, that their wedding journey needed to be curated, and that compromising on aesthetics meant compromising on success. Ethan realized then that she wasn't asking, she was issuing demands. She wanted him to cancel the entire event immediately. Not reschedule. Not adjust. Cancel. And to make it worse, she wanted him to handle the fallout alone. She told him to message every guest and create a believable excuse. Maybe a family emergency. Maybe a sudden scheduling conflict. Anything except the truth. When Ethan suggested they could discuss it or find a middle ground, she rolled her eyes and called him dramatic. She said real couples postponed things all the time and that he should be grateful. She cared enough about their image to intervene. The worst part wasn't her insults or her demands. It was how casual she was about all of it, as if months of effort, money, excitement, and memories meant nothing compared to a few curated Instagram photos. Ethan sat there in silence, watching the person he thought he knew reveal a shallow, polished surface with nothing solid underneath. He had always sensed her obsession with appearances, but never imagined it would sabotage one of the most important moments of their lives. By the end of the conversation, Ethan wasn't just disappointed. He was heartbroken, confused, and unsure how someone he loved could be so dismissive of everything that mattered to him. And yet, beneath the confusion, a quiet, unfamiliar feeling began to form, a warning he could no longer ignore. Alyssa hadn't just canceled a party. She had exposed the fragile truth of their relationship. Ethan barely slept that night. He lay awake, replaying every word Alyssa had said, feeling the weight of her demands pressing on his chest like a stone. By sunrise, he had read through dozens of messages from friends confirming their attendance, each one filled with excitement and support. He thought about how they had cleared schedules, booked flights, bought gifts, and made plans just to celebrate with him. And Alyssa wanted him to lie to all of them, as if their time meant nothing. The more he thought about it, the more wrong it felt. Not just the cancellation, but the dishonesty she expected him to uphold. He realized that if he obeyed Alyssa's instructions, he would be betraying people who genuinely cared about him. People who had never once treated him as a social accessory. That thought alone was enough to spark something new inside him, courage mixed with exhaustion. By mid-morning, he sat down at his laptop, opened a blank email, and stared at the blinking cursor. His hands trembled slightly. He wasn't used to confrontation, especially not with someone he loved. But at some point during that long, sleepless night, something had shifted. He knew he couldn't protect Alyssa's image at the expense of his integrity. So he typed the truth, word for word, without exaggeration or bitterness. He explained that the engagement party had been canceled because Alyssa felt the venue, the lighting, and even the guest list didn't meet her Instagram standards. He apologized for the inconvenience, acknowledged the effort everyone had made, and thanked them for their kindness. Before hitting send, he hesitated. He knew this email would change everything. It would expose Alyssa's behavior. It would ignite conflict. It would likely end the relationship. But he also knew hiding the truth would be worse. So he took a deep breath and pressed send. Within minutes, replies flooded his inbox, messages of shock, sympathy, disbelief, and anger on his behalf. Some sent supportive jokes to lighten the mood. Others asked if he was okay. A few admitted they had long sensed something off about Alyssa's priorities. Ethan felt overwhelmed, but also strangely relieved. For the first time in months, he felt like he was standing on solid ground. But the moment Alyssa discovered what he had done, the storm began. She called him repeatedly, her voice escalating from annoyed to furious to hysterical. She accused him of humiliating her, sabotaging her social standing, and ruining her future brand partnerships. She said he had made her look shallow, completely ignoring the fact that he had only repeated her exact words. When Ethan stayed calm and refused to apologize, her tone shifted into something colder. She threatened to end the relationship unless he publicly retracted the email and blamed it on stress. Ethan felt a strange clarity wash over him. If this was how she reacted to honesty, maybe he had lost her long before the email was sent. By the end of the call, he wasn't shaken anymore. He was done pretending everything was fine. And for the first time since the chaos began, he felt a spark of determination. He wasn't going to let this moment define him as weak. Instead, he would reclaim it, even if it meant standing alone. Ethan decided that if the original engagement party was gone, he would replace it with something entirely his own. He sent out a second email, this time inviting everyone to a new gathering, a celebration with no pressure, no curated perfection, and no expectations. He titled it "Dodged a Bullet Party," partly as a joke, partly as a way to reclaim the moment that had been stolen from him. Guests responded with enthusiasm almost instantly. Many said they would not miss it for the world after everything that happened. Some even offered to help decorate or bring food, turning it into a true collective effort rather than a performance. On the day of the event, people arrived dressed in playful, creative outfits that matched the theme. One friend wore a superhero cape, joking that Ethan had been rescued from danger. Another brought a toy shield and declared it a symbol of emotional protection. The atmosphere was warm, chaotic, and full of genuine laughter, the kind of joy that required no filters or perfect angles. As the night went on, guests started taking photos, not to impress anyone but to celebrate Ethan's newfound freedom. Someone made a playful banner that read, "Cheers to Survival," while another guest baked a cake decorated with a tiny fondant bullet being dodged by a stick figure. The silliness gave everyone permission to drop their guard and simply have fun. At one point, Ethan stood in the center of the room and looked around at the people who showed up for him. They weren't there for aesthetics. They weren't there for clout. They were there because they cared. Several guests approached him privately, telling him he deserved better than someone who valued strangers' opinions more than their own relationship. Those words sank in deeper than he expected. For the first time since the cancellation, Ethan felt something close to peace. Meanwhile, his phone vibrated continuously in his pocket. Alyssa called again and again, each call more frantic than the last. He ignored every one of them. Some guests noticed and offered to take his phone away so he wouldn't have to deal with the noise, but Ethan simply silenced it and slipped it into a drawer. He didn't want her voice to intrude on this moment. Toward the end of the night, someone posted a few photos from the party with the hashtag #DodgeDayBullet. Within hours, the pictures began circulating online, gathering supportive comments from people who had no idea who Ethan was but understood the message. The internet embraced the humor, the resilience, and the authenticity of the event. People admired the way Ethan had turned humiliation into celebration. Even strangers praised him for refusing to let vanity dictate his happiness. The attention wasn't something he had planned for, but it felt strangely comforting to see so many people validating the truth he had lived through. As the night wound down, Ethan stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. He felt lighter than he had in months. The laughter from inside drifted into the night air, reminding him that even when things fall apart, something new and unexpectedly beautiful can grow in the empty space left behind. And in that quiet moment, he realized that this party wasn't about dodging a bullet. It was about finally seeing the path he was meant to walk, one free from the shadows of someone else's expectations. The morning after the party, Ethan was still cleaning up when he heard a loud knock at the door. He expected maybe a friend who had forgotten something, but when he opened it, he found Alyssa standing there with her mother and older sister flanking her like a courtroom entourage. All three wore the same stern expression, as if they had rehearsed their roles on the drive over. Alyssa marched inside without waiting to be invited, her heels striking the floor sharply, her face twisted with indignation. She demanded to know why he ignored her calls and why he had publicly disgraced her. Ethan didn't react. He simply crossed his arms and waited, but her sister jumped in before he could speak. She accused him of ruining Alyssa's reputation, insisting the online photos made their family look ridiculous. Alyssa's mother added that respectable adults handled conflicts privately, not through attention-seeking parties. Ethan almost laughed at the hypocrisy, but he kept his composure. He asked them if any of them actually cared about what had happened between him and Alyssa, or if their outrage was only about how it looked to others. They avoided his eyes, which told him everything he needed to know. Alyssa then took a step closer, her voice dripping with entitlement. She said he needed to post a public apology, one that framed the email as a misunderstanding, and reassured everyone that she had nothing to do with the cancellation. She claimed it was the only way to fix the damage he had done to her name. Ethan calmly said no. Her shock was immediate, almost theatrical. She demanded to know how he could refuse her when she had worked so hard to elevate him. He frowned and asked what she meant by that. Alyssa didn't hesitate. She said she had improved his wardrobe, shaped his social circle, helped him make better life decisions, and made him appear more marketable. Her words were clinical, detached, as if she were talking about managing a brand rather than loving a partner. Each sentence hammered into Ethan's chest, not because they hurt, but because they finally made everything clear. He realized she never saw him as a person, only as a project. When he didn't respond right away, Alyssa smirked slightly, as if she believed her speech had humbled him. Instead, it had the opposite effect. Ethan straightened his posture and told her, with steady certainty, that their relationship was over. The room went still. Alyssa's expression twisted from disbelief to fury. Her mother gasped, and her sister muttered something about him being ungrateful and short-sighted. Alyssa accused him of throwing away their future over a minor disagreement about aesthetics. Ethan told her it wasn't about aesthetics. It was about respect. It was about values. It was about the person she had revealed herself to be. Alyssa demanded he take it back. He refused again. Her voice rose higher, cracking with desperation, but Ethan didn't waver. There was no fear left in him, no doubt, no hesitation. Just certainty. Finally, Alyssa stormed out, her heels echoing down the hall. Her mother and sister trailing behind her with looks that tried, and failed, to conceal their embarrassment. When the door closed, Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It felt like freedom. Alyssa didn't disappear quietly after the breakup. If anything, she seemed determined to pull Ethan back into her orbit through chaos alone. Within hours, she began posting vague, dramatic messages online about being betrayed, used, and manipulated by someone pretending to be stable. People who knew the real story pushed back immediately, questioning her version and reminding her of the email Ethan had sent with her own words quoted verbatim. But Alyssa didn't stop. She escalated. She started messaging Ethan's friends privately, claiming he had fabricated the entire situation to embarrass her. Some of the messages were so emotionally erratic that his friends forwarded them to him out of concern. A few even apologized to Alyssa at first, only to retract their sympathy minutes later when she bombarded them with contradictory explanations. Her desperation made her stories crumble faster than she could invent new ones. The more she tried to manipulate the narrative, the more people realized how deeply she depended on external validation. Ethan tried to stay out of the mess, but Alyssa made that nearly impossible. She called him repeatedly, sometimes leaving sobbing voicemails about how he had ruined her life, other times screaming insults and accusing him of destroying her future. When he stopped answering entirely, she switched tactics and began reporting his social media accounts for harassment, even though he hadn't spoken to her once since the day she stormed out. The platforms reviewed everything and dismissed her claims, which only made her angrier. At one point, she created a brand new private group chat titled Alyssa's Real Engagement, where she invited dozens of people and announced she was planning a new engagement celebration with someone who actually deserved her. The irony was that no such person existed. Screenshots leaked almost immediately, and the internet tore the announcement apart, mocking the forced positivity and transparent attempt to regain attention. Humiliated, she deleted the entire event within hours. But deletion didn't stop the damage. People who had supported her before now openly questioned her mental stability and her fixation on maintaining an image that had already shattered. Ethan watched all of this from a distance, trying to stay detached, but part of him couldn't help feeling a strange heaviness. Not sadness for the lost relationship, but sadness for how far Alyssa was willing to fall just to keep pretending she was the victim. Her spiral continued. She posted cryptic pictures meant to imply she was thriving, only for comments to fill with questions she couldn't answer. She tried blocking people, unblocking them, blocking them again, and reshuffling her follower list to control who saw what. Her social media became a revolving door of contradictions. At the same time, she reached out to Ethan again, this time pretending to be calm. She said they could fix everything if he would just correct the narrative, insisting the breakup was only a temporary setback. Ethan didn't reply. He had nothing left to give her, not patience, not attention, not justification. And his silence enraged her more than any argument ever could. By the end of the week, Alyssa's online presence had become a strange mixture of curated smiles and emotional unraveling. People who had once praised her aesthetic now saw the cracks behind the filters. Meanwhile, Ethan felt the storm beginning to fade. He realized that sometimes the loudest chaos happens right before peace finally settles in. A few days later, Ethan received an unexpected message from a number he didn't recognize. It was Alyssa's father, asking if they could meet for a brief conversation. Ethan hesitated, unsure of what to expect, but agreed to sit down with him at a small cafe away from the noise of everything that had unfolded. When he arrived, Alyssa's father already looked exhausted, as though he had aged years in a single week. He apologized the moment Ethan sat down, saying he had no intention of defending his daughter's behavior. He admitted that Alyssa had always struggled with insecurity, that her obsession with social image grew worse over time, and that the recent events had pushed her into a sharp emotional decline. He said she hadn't eaten properly in days, hadn't slept, and had alternated between crying and frantically trying to rebuild her online persona. Ethan listened quietly, feeling a complicated mixture of empathy and detachment. He didn't wish suffering on anyone, but he also knew he could no longer be responsible for fixing her. Alyssa's father told him that the family had tried to intervene, but Alyssa refused to accept any responsibility. She kept saying that everything would be fine again if Ethan just took her back. He told Ethan that she had planned one last attempt to redeem the story, and he gently warned him to be prepared. The warning became reality the very next afternoon. Ethan heard a knock and opened the door to find Alyssa standing on the porch with a photographer behind her. She was dressed in a carefully coordinated outfit, soft tones, styled hair, makeup flawless, but her eyes were red and tired beneath the surface. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile built from desperation rather than joy. She asked if they could take closure photos, images that would show the world they had parted peacefully and maturely. She said it would help both of them rebuild their reputations. She asked him to hold her hand for a few quick shots, insisting it would take only minutes, and that it was the least he could do after everything. Ethan stepped outside and gently closed the door behind him so the photographer couldn't see his reaction. He told her softly, but firmly, that he wouldn't participate in anything that twisted the truth again. Her smile collapsed instantly. She tried reasoning, then pleading, then accusing him of being cruel, but Ethan remained steady. He said that both of them needed to move on, not cling to a narrative meant to deceive people. Alyssa's breathing quickened, and for a moment, she looked like she might collapse under the weight of her own panic. Her photographer awkwardly lowered his camera, unsure whether to stay or go. Alyssa finally turned away, tears streaking her carefully applied makeup, and hurried down the steps without another word. The photographer followed her silently, leaving Ethan alone on the porch with a strange feeling of finality settling over him. Over the next week, Ethan noticed a shift among people who once supported Alyssa unquestioningly. Her closest friends started reaching out to him, some apologizing, others admitting they had tried to talk to her but couldn't get through. Her family grew quieter online, no longer defending her or making excuses. It was as if everyone around her finally saw the pattern that had been hidden behind flawless photos for years. Meanwhile, Ethan's life slowly returned to a calm rhythm. He spent more time with friends, reconnected with people he had unintentionally distanced himself from, and allowed himself to breathe freely again. He felt no desire for revenge or vindication, just relief. In the quiet that followed all the chaos, he realized he had escaped not just a broken relationship, but a world built on fragile illusions. For the first time in a long time, he felt genuinely grounded. And as much as he hoped Alyssa would eventually find her way, he knew her journey was no longer tied to his. In the days that followed, Ethan finally felt a sense of stillness settle into his life. He woke up without the heaviness he had grown used to carrying, and for the first time in months, he could breathe without tension tightening his chest. He sold the engagement ring and donated the money to a charity he admired, wanting something good to come from something that had ended so painfully. He met up with friends he hadn't seen in far too long, laughing freely and reconnecting with the people who had always shown him genuine care. He realized how much of himself He had slowly given up to fit into Alyssa's constructed world. Now, he was reclaiming every piece. He took long walks, cooked meals at home, and rediscovered small joys he had forgotten. Meanwhile, Alyssa remained trapped in the same cycle of curated images and forced positivity, her online world growing quieter as more people drifted away. Their lives moved in opposite directions, one toward authenticity, the other toward isolation. Ethan didn't celebrate her downfall, but he no longer felt responsible for saving her. He was finally free, finally himself, and finally at peace.